Sometimes, the truth does not arrive as a shock. It comes slowly, like a light being turned on in a room you know by heart, and suddenly, everything becomes clearer than you ever expected. For Libra, this period carries a very specific feeling. The things that once left you uncertain, the relationships that seemed stable, the decisions that have walked beside you for a long time. Now, they are being seen again through a different lens. No rush, no judgment, just clearer vision. This is not a moment to argue with the past. It is not a moment to blame yourself for the choices you made. This is a moment of understanding, gentle, yet deep enough to change how you move forward. And if you are a Libra, there is a good chance you have already felt the signs. Because right now, an important truth is slowly coming into the light. And that is exactly where our story begins. There are moments in life when nothing seems to change on the outside, yet inside, it feels as if you've quietly stepped into a different room. No noise, no clear signal announcing the shift. Just an ordinary morning you wake up to, or a very simple moment, when Libra suddenly realizes that the things that once caused hesitation no longer feel as unclear as they used to. That feeling doesn't come from logic. It arrives through repetition, a thought that keeps returning, an emotion that shows up when you least expect it. A situation you believed was already over, yet it comes back into your mind in a completely different way. For Libra, these are often quiet questions. Questions that don't demand immediate answers, but are strong enough to make you pause and listen to yourself just a little longer. Maybe you've tried to ignore those signs before, telling yourself you're overthinking, telling yourself that everything will be fine, the way it always has been. But deep down, Libra's intuition rarely speaks without reason. It doesn't shout, it doesn't push. It simply whispers again and again until you're finally ready to listen. The truth during this phase doesn't arrive as a shocking revelation. It's more like the light slowly getting brighter in a familiar room. At first, you only see one corner more clearly, then another detail, and eventually you begin to understand why you once felt so tired, so confused, or why you had to work so hard just to keep your balance. Not because you were weak, but because something had never been seen for what it truly was. Libra has always had the habit of seeing things from many sides. You're used to weighing options, showing understanding, and giving others more time. But because of that, you sometimes place your own clarity last. This phase isn't asking you to change overnight. It's simply inviting you to observe what's happening in your life with a more honest lens. Maybe it's a relationship that has lasted longer than it truly needed to. Maybe it's a decision you once believed was right, but no longer fits the person you're becoming. Or maybe it's something much quieter, the way you treat yourself, the boundaries you've allowed to be crossed, the expectations you've been carrying silently without ever naming them. What matters is that this truth doesn't come with judgment. It doesn't tell you were right or wrong. It doesn't force you to choose immediately. It simply appears to show you the entire picture instead of just the part you were used to seeing. And as that picture becomes clearer, you may feel a sense of relief that's hard to explain, as if finally you understand why you've felt the way you have for so long. For Libra, this is the moment to learn how to trust your own feelings just a little more. Not to oppose anyone, not to prove anything, but to respect the truth that's quietly forming inside you. That truth may not be complete yet. It may still be changing. But it's clear enough to remind you that you don't have to keep pretending everything is fine, when deep down, you know you need something different. There are small signs that show you're entering this phase. You grow quieter around things that once pulled you into debates. You observe more, instead of reacting right away. And you begin asking questions you once avoided. Not because you're afraid of the answers, but because you weren't ready for the changes those answers might bring. If you're feeling this, allow yourself to slow down. There's no need to rush to conclusions. No need to force immediate action. Simply acknowledge that some truth is slowly coming into focus, and that you're mature enough to look at it with calmness rather than fear. Because sometimes the most important moment is not when everything explodes, but when you quietly realize you see far more clearly than before. And from that new point of view, Libra's journey begins to shift, gently, deeply, and more honestly toward who you truly are. After the light begins to spread, what comes next is usually not a dramatic discovery, but the quiet presence of very small details. The things Libra once brushed aside, once considered unimportant, or believed time would take care of on its own, now stand still right in front of you, clearer, no longer blending into the background of everyday life. It might be a glance you once ignored during a conversation, a sentence that seemed casual, yet somehow repeated itself over time, a subtle sense of discomfort that appears every time you make the same choice again. Before, you may have convinced yourself that it was all just coincidence, but when you look back from where you stand now, Libra begins to see that those pieces were never truly scattered. They were simply waiting for you to be calm enough to place them together. For Libra, it's seeing the full picture doesn't come from harsh scrutiny. It comes from gentle observation. You don't need to hunt for mistakes. You don't need to label anyone as right or wrong. You only need to see things for what they actually are. And when you do, many old questions begin to answer themselves in ways that feel surprisingly soft. You may realize that a relationship hasn't really changed, but that you have grown since the beginning. You may see that a work or financial decision that once left you unsure is now revealing why it never brought the sense of security you hoped for. Or perhaps the clearest truth of all lies in the way you have repeatedly placed your own needs last, while quietly hoping balance would eventually appear on its own. What's important is that as these details become clear, they do not come with blame. There is no sharp regret, no urge to rewind time, only a very human understanding that at every moment in the past, you did the best you could with what you knew then. And the truth you're seeing now doesn't come to deny that. It comes to add depth to your story. Libra has always been used to seeing others with compassion, but in this phase, you begin learning how to offer that same compassion to yourself. As each small detail finds its place, you no longer need to ask why you felt so tired or why you once felt so lost. Everything has its reason, and that reason does not make you weaker. On the contrary, it helps you understand the true value of real balance. There are things you once believed were simply caused by circumstances. Now you can see that part of them came from quiet compromises you accepted for far too long. Boundaries you never voiced, desires you set aside because you feared disrupting the harmony. And when these things come into view, you don't need to fix them right away. You only need to acknowledge that you can see them now. The truth at this stage doesn't wound because it takes nothing away. It simply gives clarity back to you. Clarity to understand that not every breakdown is a failure. Not every unmet expectation is a mistake. Sometimes they are simply necessary markers, helping you understand where you truly stand in this life. If you are Libra and you feel these pieces slowly falling into place, allow yourself to stay in that moment just a little longer. There's no need to rush and share it with anyone. No need to reach a final conclusion. Just recognize that you are seeing more than before. And sometimes, the act of seeing alone is already a significant step forward, because when the things once overlooked begin to come into focus, you don't just understand the past more clearly. You begin preparing a stronger foundation for what comes next, not through defense, but through deeper understanding and respect for your own journey. When the pieces begin to fall into place, what happens next doesn't come from events on the outside, but from the way Libra starts to see the world. Not everything changes, but your point of view shifts very gently. A shift subtle enough that others may never notice it, yet deep enough for you to feel it clearly. You no longer approach life through the same familiar emotions. You stop reacting on instinct. You stop trying to make everything look fine just to keep the surface calm. At this stage, Libra begins to realize that seeing clearly does not mean judging. You can recognize the nature of a situation without labeling it right or wrong. You can understand a person without needing to defend or justify them. And most importantly, you can look back at yourself without blame, without denying the choices you once made. This change doesn't make you cold. If anything, it makes you calmer. A new steadiness shows up in the way you listen, in the way you hold silence, in the way you choose not to respond right away. You begin to understand that you don't always need to balance everything for everyone. Sometimes, balance begins when you stand firmly where you are, without leaning too far in any direction. Libra has always seen the world through the lens of harmony. But in this season of maturity, you learn something deeper. And harmony doesn't mean avoiding the truth. It doesn't mean softening every conflict by ignoring your own feelings. Real harmony at times comes from accepting that some things don't need to be fixed, only seen clearly. You start to notice that certain old emotions no longer control you the way they once did. What used to shake you deeply now feels like a gentle wave, not because you've hardened, but because you understand why those emotions existed in the first place. And once you understand, you no longer need to fight them. You let them pass, the way an adult allows the weather to change without seeing it as a problem. At this point in the journey, Libra learns how to stand in the middle, not in the middle to please both sides, but in the middle between yourself and the story unfolding. You watch emotions come and go. You listen to thoughts without letting them drive every decision. You begin to tell the difference between familiar fear and intuition, quietly pointing towards something more important. You may realize you no longer need to explain yourself so much. You no longer feel the urge to prove that you were right, or that you tried hard enough. You understand that everyone views the world from a different angle, and being misunderstood no longer unsettles you. This steadiness arrives naturally, as if it was always there, waiting for you to become quiet enough to feel it. This shift in perspective also opens a new kind of freedom for Libra. Freedom from maintaining an image. Freedom from reacting to other people's expectations. Freedom to admit that you have changed, and that this doesn't betray who you once were. It simply continues the process of growing up. In this quiet space, you may find yourself observing more than acting, not because you're hesitant, but because you're learning to act from clarity, not pressure. You allow things to settle long enough to see their true nature, instead of responding only to what's on the surface. If you are Libra and you're living through this phase, you may begin to notice that maturity isn't as loud as people often think. It doesn't always come with big decisions or bold declarations. Sometimes maturity is simply the moment you stop lying to yourself. You stop idealizing what no longer fits. You stop blaming yourself for what happened before you knew how to choose differently. And from this place, you begin to understand that seeing clearly doesn't take away your softness. It gives that softness boundaries. It teaches you when to listen, when to pause, and when to trust that your silence is already a complete answer. This change in perspective doesn't end the story. It simply places you in a new position where you can continue your journey with clearer eyes and a lighter heart. And from here, Libra no longer searches for balance out in the world, but begins to build it quietly, steadily, from within. When clarity becomes full enough, Libra no longer forces themselves to stay in places where the inner rhythm has already begun to fall out of sync. Letting go at this stage doesn't come from disappointment or emotional pain, but from a very mature awareness. An awareness that some things were the right choices at one time, but no longer reflect who you are becoming now. And once that becomes clear, holding on only makes everything feel heavier than it needs to be. For Libra, letting go is not a sudden cut. It feels more like a quiet step back, just far enough to no longer be pulled into familiar cycles. You don't leave out of anger. You leave because you no longer want to convince yourself that everything is fine, when deep inside, you already know the rhythm has changed. You may notice that you're no longer excited by conversations that once felt natural. You no longer feel the need to explain your choices over and over again. You stop waiting for validation from places where you once invested so much energy. These changes aren't loud. They happen quietly. Sometimes you only realize them later, when you look back and see that you've shifted without even trying. Libra often holds on longer than necessary. Because you believe in adjustment, because you trust that, given enough time, harmony will return. But, at this point, you begin to understand that not all harmony should be maintained through one-sided effort. Some connections, some roles, some expectations have already fulfilled their purpose in your life. Continuing to hold them is no longer kindness. It becomes an unnecessary delay for everyone involved. Letting go also happens in how you see yourself. Old standards, old versions of who you thought you had to be, begin to loosen their grip. You stop forcing yourself to always be agreeable, to always be available, to always stand in the middle to keep things from falling apart. You allow yourself to be tired. You allow yourself to say no through silence. You allow yourself to not show up where your presence no longer feels right. What's striking is that, when you let go this way, you don't feel the loss you once feared. Instead, there's a different kind of space. Not the space of absence, but the space of room. Room to think more clearly. Room to feel your own rhythm again. room to stop reacting constantly to external demands. Libra begins to understand that stepping back is not always a negative thing. Sometimes it's how you protect the inner balance you worked so hard to rebuild. You don't need to play the strong one. You don't need to play the selfless one. You only need to be honest about your limits. And that honesty, even when unspoken, creates a very real sense of stability inside you. There are things you once believed you had to carry forever, but now, with clearer sight, you realize you were carrying them out of habit, not true responsibility. And when you set them down, the world doesn't collapse the way you imagined. Everything continues, and so do you, but with a much lighter feeling. Letting go doesn't make Libra distant. It simply makes you more selective about where your energy goes. You begin to understand that not every place needs your sense of balance. Not every person needs you standing in the middle holding everything together. Some spaces need to remain open, so each person can find their own place to stand. When what no longer fits is finally released, you don't instantly feel complete, but you feel real. Real with what you're experiencing, real with your inner rhythm. And from that truth, a new sense of calm slowly begins to form. Not the calm that comes from everything going perfectly, but the calm that comes from no longer fighting your own feelings. At this stage, Libra isn't searching for dramatic change. You only need enough lightness to keep moving forward without carrying burdens that no longer belong to you. And sometimes, that quiet act of letting go is the clearest sign of all that you've truly grown. After what no longer fits has been set down, what follows is not the emptiness many people fear. For Libra, it's a very particular state, a feeling as if the body and the mind are finally able to stand upright again, after a long time of leaning in too many directions. Balance in this moment is not something you try to create. It arrives naturally once you stop resisting what you have already seen and quietly accepted. When the truth is acknowledged without noise, Libra's inner world begins to steady itself in a very organic way. The emotional swings that once made you overthink start to soften. You no longer feel the need to weigh every small decision so carefully. Not because you've become careless, but because you now understand more clearly what truly matters to you. At this stage, balance is no longer about keeping everything around you in harmony. It becomes alignment between what you feel and what you choose. You begin to notice that you don't linger as long at every crossroads. There's a quiet clarity inside, not loud, not demanding, but steady enough to let you know which direction is yours and which one no longer is. Libra is often used to seeking agreement. You listen to others, consider different perspectives, and sometimes allow outside validation to shape your choices. But when balance is restored, you begin to realize that not every decision needs approval. Some choices only need to feel right to you in a very personal, very calm way. And that feeling, even when you can't fully explain it, carries a deep sense of trust. You may notice that opposing opinions no longer shake you so easily, not because you believe you're always right, but because you no longer feel the need to change yourself to meet someone else's expectations. This steadiness comes from the time you've spent getting to know yourself, from understanding what you are truly seeking in life and what is no longer necessary. This new balance also shows itself in how you face uncertainty. Before, unclear situations may have caused anxiety, pushing you to control or demand answers right away. Now, you learn how to stay with unanswered questions. Now, you understand that not everything needs immediate definition. Some answers arrive only when you are ready, and waiting for them no longer unsettles you the way it once did. There's a familiar feeling that returns in this phase, one you haven't touched in a long time. The feeling that you're on the right path, even if the road ahead isn't fully visible yet. Not loud confidence, but quiet certainty. You don't need to tell anyone about it. You feel it in your everyday choices, in how you arrange your time, in how you begin to prioritize your own sense of peace. Libra starts to trust their own rhythm again. You stop comparing your pace to someone else's. You understand that everyone moves differently. And slowing down at certain points doesn't mean you're falling behind. Balance now isn't about catching up. It's about no longer moving against yourself. In this state, your decisions carry less inner conflict. You no longer choose out of fear of loss. You no longer choose just to please. You choose because it aligns with your current values. And when you choose from that place, the outcome doesn't weigh on you as heavily. You understand that you did the best you could in that moment, and that what follows is not entirely within your control. Restored balance also allows Libra to be gentler with themselves. You stop forcing perfection. You stop demanding constant certainty. You stop needing to appear composed at all times. You allow slow days. You allow moments of doubt, without seeing them as signs of failure. You understand that real stability doesn't mean never wavering, but knowing how to return to your center after each shift. If you're noticing that you trust your own feelings more, that you seek reassurance less, that you feel calm about choices no one has confirmed yet, these may be signs that balance is finding its way back. A balance that doesn't need to be displayed, doesn't need to be proven, but is strong enough to support you as you move forward. And from this place, Libra no longer walks in doubt. You walk with the understanding that you are where you need to be, doing what needs to be done, in the way that best fits who you are right now. As balance slowly settles back into place, Libra begins to realize that seeing clearly doesn't close the journey at all. If anything, it feels like a door opening very softly. No sound, no announcement, just enough for you to sense that you're stepping into a different chapter of your life. A chapter no longer guided by confusion or borrowed expectations, but by a deeper understanding of who you are. At this point, Libra is no longer searching for big answers. You don't need to know exactly where you'll be years from now. What matters more is that you understand where you are right now. That understanding doesn't come from overthinking. It comes from something quieter, from the very real feeling that you've stopped turning away from what you feel. You no longer avoid the truth. You no longer exaggerate it. You simply see it as it is. Seeing clearly doesn't make Libra hard or closed off. On the contrary, it brings a very gentle kind of awakening. You begin to see others with deeper understanding, without expecting them to live up to the images you once held in your mind. You recognize that everyone is walking their own path, that carrying different limits, different lessons. And with that understanding, you no longer feel the need to adjust or balance everything for everyone. This awakening also changes how you see your own worth. Before, you may have measured it without realizing, through recognition, through being needed, through the feeling that you had done enough for others. Now, you begin to feel your worth from the inside, from knowing you deserve respect. You deserve relationships that don't require constant self-adjustment. You deserve a life where peace is not a reward, but a foundation. Libra moves forward with awareness not through sudden changes, but through very small choices. You choose to listen to your emotions earlier, instead of waiting until they become too heavy. You choose to pause when you notice you're pushing too hard. Yet you choose to speak less, but more truthfully. And each of these choices, even when unseen, slowly shapes a life that moves more in rhythm with you. At this stage, you also understand that seeing clearly doesn't take away your natural gentleness. It simply gives that gentleness direction. You can still be compassionate without giving up your boundaries. You can still love without forgetting yourself. You can still stay, and you can also leave when something no longer fits. The lightness you feel doesn't come from everything being perfect. It comes from no longer fighting the truth. When you stop pretending, when you stop holding roles that were never truly yours, you begin to feel more like yourself in each moment. And that feeling, quiet as it is, carries lasting strength. Libra doesn't need to prove they have changed. The change shows in the way you walk forward, in a slower rhythm of life, in the calm with which you face what once unsettled you. You understand that awareness isn't a state of constant clarity. It's the ability to return to the truth whenever you drift away. And when you look back on the entire journey, you may realize that the truth was never there to hurt you. It came to free you from layers of uncertainty that had covered you for too long. Seeing clearly doesn't make you heavier. It makes you lighter, because you're no longer carrying what was never yours. This is not the end of the story. It's the place where Libra begins to move forward with clearer eyes and a steadier heart. No rush, no need to know every answer. Just keep going, with the understanding that each day you are living closer to your own truth. And sometimes, that alone is enough to open a new journey, quietly and deeply meaningful.